Good morning. My name is Bernadette McDonald, and I am the host of What is Your Real Name? Today we have the privilege of interviewing a genealogist and learn some terms, learn some accessibilities. How do you get around the DNA? How do you read it? How do you understand it? How do you connect things? So please welcome Laura Woodward. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Great, thanks. So how did you come about being a genealogist?
You know, I think the thing that got me into this was my uncle. I call him my uncle, but he is my cousin, really. He was a cousin of my dad's, a first cousin, and my father died when he was very young, and I was just a little girl. And so even though I know the stories from when I was a little girl, but I didn't know the stories of an adult, a relationship with your father. And so I realize I have all sorts of gaps in my knowledge of my dad's side of the family. Our family moved around a lot, so we weren't close to the Woodwards. And but we did, exchange these cards at Christmas and, cookies and stuff.
It was cordial.
Yeah, and gradually they started sending me pictures of that side of the family, and I realized that my uncle was a serious genealogist.
Okay.
And he had a tree, and as I got older, I created an ancestry account. I was very young and poor, so I did a free account, and he shared his tree with me, and that just opened up a whole world for me. He had saved all those family pictures there. He had pictures of my dad from when he was a kid, and they knew things about my family that I just never had heard. And there are some very interesting stories in that.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So it really opened things up for me. I never would have known about my father's side of the family if I hadn't had that tree.
Okay.
So gradually I started my own tree, and I was by then a student at Wayne State University. And so I had access to the ancestry databases through the library. So I just started saving those to my laptop when I was supposed to be studying other things.
We won't tell nobody.
Yeah. But I learned so much there, and I realized that it was helping me. It was helping me to understand who I was. And recently, I had really never met that side of the family. And I went to his funeral, and I was sitting there with these cousins of mine, and I looked around, and my dad had really helped me. I got teased as a little kid because I had big eyes. And my dad had some great jokes that he would tell me that made me feel better about that. Well, I looked around, and everyone at that table had my eyes. And I was
familiarity.
thinking, yeah. I felt like I was with my people,
Yeah, you belonged.
I belong. Yeah. So that, I think, has been the reason why I've been so interested in this work. And as the genetic stuff came into this, I'm a database person, but for my career, and I realized that these are just databases, and I know what to do with databases to make them stand on their heads, and it's just a couple of tricks that I know, but they have taken me pretty far in learning more about my family, and I just love learning more about my family.
What platform do you find is the best when looking?
Let me go ahead and share a slide with you. Let's see. There are a bunch of different platforms, and I think the most important thing for you to know is that you should use the platform that works for you, that you feel comfortable with.
How do you know which works for you?
Well, it depends on what type of user you are. So I would say Ancestry, if you're brand new to this, is the easiest.
Okay.
So if you're intimidated, I would start there.
Okay.
The weakness with that is that it's pricey, you know, but it's good to find regular people who aren't so techy. You have your largest number of people who have put their trees in there. I really love Ancestry. But I would say make sure you find something that works for your needs and for who you're trying to find, and then just use it consistently. GEDmatch is wonderful because it includes the platforms other than Ancestry, so 23andMe, some of the more techy genealogy sites. You can just import your DNA there. So I like that. Exactly. And it's free. So even though the people
even better,
are techier, it's that makes a big difference, doesn't
exactly.
it? My heritage, I find my heritage very hard, but I realize that if I want to get in touch with my relatives who are in Ireland, they're more likely to use my heritage. So it just depends on who you're trying to get a hold of.
And location, I would assume.
I think so. Yeah. So there's a lot of European people who are in that one. So it just depends. There are also, I would say, Family Search and WikiTree are both very good because they're free.
Okay.
But they're a shared tree, so you don't have control over it. But I love Family Search because you can see very easily, and we'll talk about this later, we can see how you're connected to someone. But just like I was saying before with my heritage, a lot of your Irish people are in my heritage. In Family Search, I find that my American pioneers are in there.
Oh, okay.
So, but I don't find a lot of Irish people there. So there, different ones give you different things. And then of course, Facebook groups. And I think that's how I met you, was through a Facebook group.
Tons of them.
It's surprising what you can learn in a Facebook group.
Yeah. So what is, I've heard you refer to GEDmatchers. Yes.
GEDmatchers is a community that I've created. The reason why I started it is because I originally tested, because I was more interested in medical information. So I tested with 23andMe.
Okay.
But then I couldn't compare my results to anyone in GEDmatch, because at that time, all the Ancestry people were in one half of the program, and then all the 23andMe people were in the new Genesis program. Okay. That was a long time when Genesis was the new program. But so
technology, right? It's beautiful.
It's so
confusing though at times, like, because I know for myself, when I was initially looking, there were so many platforms and so many avenues to look. You really didn't know until you actually sat and spent the time learning about these different platforms and even these different groups. I think a lot of terminology comes up in groups where you can learn that side of things, you know, like what are centimorgans, you know, and SNP, you know?
Yeah, that's right. That's a good question. And if you look at your results that you get as part of your output, when you're running a GEDmatch report, you're going to find CMs, which are centimorgans, SNPs, which are snips, and MRCA is another thing on there. And then these little green trees are an important thing. And then we were talking about NPEs. So these are all interesting things. I can talk in more detail about the centimorgan. I have learned the most from people who are orphans. They are really the experts in how to deal with just the genetics. You know what I mean? Just because they only have little bits of information, but it's surprising what people do with little bits of information.
Well, exactly. And the more you learn, the more you know, the more you discuss with different people, the more questions you ask, 99% of the time, the more assistance you receive.
Mm-hmm.
So I implore those people who are just learning and just starting out on their journey or have been stuck to request somebody within any group, really, that can assist on knowing these ins and outs and how to use that tiny little bit of information. I mean, you might only have 5 centimorgans with somebody, but through that 5 centimorgans, you could potentially find a whole lineage, but it's knowledge is knowing, and sometimes you need to request that of others to do it. And, I know a few people that find it extremely difficult to do because it's private to them, right? And the fear of the what ifs, like, oh, well, okay, what if I do find my mom? What if I do find my dad? Then what do I do? So it can be extremely exciting at the same time, overwhelming, a lot of times. But I noticed on here, MRCA, what exactly is that?
So that is the number of generations back you would need to go with the person to figure out where your connection is. So if you take a look at this picture, I don't have one for Mary Mac. I've changed all the names.
Okay, that's fine.
but it looks like Howard, who comes right under her. It's 7.43. So 7.43 means it's not clean, but it's about 7 or 8 generations back where you're going to find your shared ancestors or your shared couple.
Excuse me. So would you agree or disagree that for people who are looking for family per se, to seriously find the generations prior, like a great-grandparent, and go from there? Or do you go from where you are and start reaching out towards cousins, if you will?
I would say, let's say you're in a group, and so I have my GEDmatch group, and that is a group, a community of people. I don't know if you've ever run a report and emailed the people on your list, and they never get back to you.
I've sent beautiful letters like 3-4 years ago, and I'm still waiting for a response. I know that they have accessed it. I know that they have looked at it, but getting sometimes that can be so frustrating because you feel like you're so close, or you hope that that person has the information you're looking for in order to assist, right? Yeah. Well, I found in my journey, most people that I would reach out to, minus the ones who never got back to me, really didn't know anything. They themselves were looking, right? Yeah. So how do you deal with something like that?
Well, that's a good question. So this is, you start with your report. So you've run your matches on GEDmatch. Now this is an example from GEDmatch, but it's the same in other programs. But you look at these key things, and let me just explain what SNPs are. Yeah. So there are SNPs, and then there are centimorgans. And for me, I'm interested in people who, my Irish relatives, and they came over a long time ago. So a lot of times I'm working with small centimorgans, so around 7 centimorgans. But you can look, and if you look back at this report, 7 centimorgans is very small. For you guys, for orphans, you're probably looking for your parents or your sister, or so you're going to want to look for higher numbers of centimorgans. But sometimes these small centimorgan matches can be helpful, especially if they have a high number of SNPs.
And so what's SNP?
SNPs. So if you're thinking about it, centimorgans, let's see, I have a, centimorgans are like, okay, let's say you're at a football game.
Okay.
And you know how they have those lines that they draw. So this is the 20-yard line, this is the 40-yard line.
Mm-hmm.
So the measurement is an SNP.
Oh, okay.
But the number of blades of grass between the two measurements is, so centimorgans is between the two goalposts. And then the SNPs are the number of blades of grass in between those two goalposts. So they're the number of things that you're measuring that match.
The actual DNA matching, the familiarity between the two.
Exactly. And so the thing is that some centimorgans that you'll measure in someone's DNA have a lot of matches.
Okay.
But some of them, just like on a football field, sometimes you have patchy areas where you're not growing a lot of grass. And so that's fewer chances to measure things. And so even though you might have a high number of centimorgans, if your SNPs, your snips, are small, then you know that it's perhaps a little bit less accurate. So it's better to spend your time on the more accurate measurements. So you can measure it by the length, which is the centimorgans, or the number of blades in between. So I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm not a geneticist.
It makes sense to me because, I mean, like I said, starting out and starting this journey and trying to figure out what's what does everything mean? How is it broken down? I find it interesting to know because I find there's a lot of unfamiliarity between the two, if you will. One seems to be, for me, a little more accurate for certain things, but not for others. So how can they be so different and yet the same?
You know, it all has to do with the number, how they calculate things. And every company has a they're like chefs, you know, you're making vanilla cake, and some people put in 2 tablespoons of vanilla, and some people put 3 tablespoons of vanilla, you know?
Yeah.
And you can find, let's say, in your connection in Ancestry may not show up, but if you download that same data, put it in GEDmatch, you might find it. I was reading that sometimes sometimes they have certain parts of the DNA that they ignore. So Ancestry ignores quite a few things that maybe GEDmatch doesn't.
Like?
Well, anything that seems to be an ethnicity, they'll usually take out. But I really don't know the genetics of that, but I know that you can get different matches. Sometimes you'll find people on GEDmatch who you can't find on Ancestry. It doesn't mean they're not a match.
Yeah.
You can look at the SNPs yourself and judge whether it's a good match. Ancestry is much more proprietary, so it's hard for you to see, to kind of delve in. And the thing is, that is great for someone who's brand new to this. Mm-hmm. It's only after a lot of work that you suddenly realize that things are not always the way you would expect them to be, and that you're interested in the details. For someone who's brand new to this, it's overwhelming. And they do a nice job of kind of helping you to find the best matches. Mm-hmm. But as you learn more, you can judge things yourself.
How do you link the families? Like, how do you provide somebody with a lineage?
I have a couple of different examples that I can show you from different programs. So the first one is for Ancestry, and a lot of people get their start in Ancestry. You'll get your kit, and then you'll go into the DNA part of Ancestry, and you'll see a bunch of matches. And this is an example of my family. I've changed the names. Mm-hmm. But these are the things I look at. Now, the nice thing is that I have a calculation with my mother. So once that is in Ancestry, it will code for you who is your mother and who's on her side and who's not on her side. And I find that very helpful in figuring out the lineage.
So do you use like a DNA printer to have a more breakdown as to where they fit by their centimorgans?
Well, let's see. In terms of centimorgans, let me go back a little bit. I have a nice chart that I got from Bedinger. He's this guy who he looks at DNA and tries to see how to make it more practical for us. And so he has this chart, and I use this to try to figure out what kind of a connection I have. And this is helpful because on one side you see your standard connections, and on the other side you see your half connections. So like I have a part of my family where there were 2 husbands, and so it shows you how to break things down for a half sister, a half brother. So you look at these counts, and this is a little bit blurry here, but you could look and say, oh, it looks like I have someone with 3,000 centimorgans. Well, that's probably a very high match. That's probably a child or someone very close.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I find that very helpful.
Okay.
2 other things I try in Ancestry is once you've made your tree, I look at people who have stolen my pictures.
Oh, great idea.
Or I look at people whose pictures I have stolen. You can click on them, click on their tree, and I click on the name of the person, and then I say view tree, and you can learn a lot that way. You don't know that their trees are right, but they're a good guide.
Mm-hmm. Do you recommend that somebody who's making a tree, if they know what their birth name is, to use their birth name opposed to their adopted name?
I would definitely do that. What do you do that for yours?
I have 2 trees because when I started my journey, I didn't know who my biological father was. So within so many years, only the last 3 years, I come to find out what my birth father's name is. I have not changed it on my initial tree, but I have 2 trees, one under his name and one under the known name that I know, right? Which is the one McDonald. Mm-hmm. So I just found it interesting because it's like, all right, well, Ancestry, 23andMe want you to, and even my heritage want you to set up these trees. Well, I think that intimidates a lot of people when they're first starting out because they only know who they are.
Yeah.
And they may not even know who they are.
Yeah.
Right? So they're starting off on the knowledge of who they think they are. And therefore, the trees, I like the concept of the trees, but I found throughout my time that so many trees were misguided, if you will.
Yeah.
So
there are a lot of errors.
So I personally don't rely on the tree. I find some people will say, well, you need to do your birth name, or you should do your birth name. And it's like, well, what if you don't know your birth name?
Yeah, right. Uh-huh.
Right?
That's a good point.
Yeah, so.
One thing I do, so I create mirror trees, and there are a lot of great videos on how to do it. What you do is, as you find people, You kind of save them to your tree.
Mhm.
But my mirror trees are private. I don't share them with other people because it's experimental. So I'll save someone to my tree, and then I'll wait and see what sort of hints pop up for that. And gradually those hints can link us. But those you save a person individually to your tree, and then gradually the hints might come up. But sometimes the hints are good, sometimes the hints are bad.
Well, if you have a very common surname, for
It's
example,
very troublesome.
very troublesome. I mean, my biological surname is Leduc. There are thousands of them. Half of them are related. So throughout my journey, I have found half the hints I get are from the other Leduc lineage. That's not, quote, related to, right? So that takes a little bit of time of figuring out, yeah, you might have the birth date, or, you know, you get a name that's misspelled. And I find a lot of people, when they're in their searches, focus on a surname. If the surname isn't what they're looking for, they dismiss it.
Right.
And to me, I find that so wrong. Like, look at the centimorgans, look at the SNPs, look at everything else. It's not just the surname, because like I said, some people don't even know their surname.
It's so interesting that you say that, because one of my first connections, I just went down my list and I was like, okay, I'm looking for a Woodward. I emailed her, and finally we did get in touch, and it turns out she's not related to my Woodwards. You know? Exactly. Surnames can really be a red herring, and you shouldn't rely too much on them. It's great when someone knows their real name, but it's surprising how many of our connections are on our mother's sides. And you just
how do you determine that?
Pardon?
How do you determine that, mother side or father side?
Well, let me show you. This is one way. Let's see, resume, share. Okay, so one thing, if you take a look at this output on Ancestry, if you have your mother's DNA as part of it, it says on it, so Gina Doe is my mother. Okay. And then you can see that Joe Schmo is not related to her, because, but then it says underneath, so Gina Doe and Harold Doe, they both say mother's side. And so that is a very easy way to do it in Ancestry. But another thing you can do is you can, for example, in GEDmatch, you can run your shared matches and see if your mother, you have to know who your mother is, but see if your mother is one of their shared matches. So that's a good, easy way to do that.
Or an aunt or an uncle or cousin.
Right.
If you're familiar with what their names are.
Yeah. So that's exactly. So so let's say if you don't have your mother, you have an uncle. Well, you know which side they're on, and you see if they're a shared match. There are a couple of other things that you can use to find your lineage. I love Family Search because it's a shared tree, and so is WikiTree. Let's say you have a relative, and they say, "Oh, I have a Family Search tree." You look them up. You can't look up living people, so you have to ask them for someone who's dead. Yeah. Then you find that person, and then if you look at this green thing I've highlighted, it asks you to view my relationship. Okay. And then this is the report that you get when you click on that, and it shows you exactly how you're related to them.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It's a great shortcut. What I have noticed that it doesn't always give me the best lineage because there's lots of errors, but it gives me a lineage, so it's very helpful.
Well, it gives you resources to look up.
Exactly. You want to investigate it yourself to verify. Yeah, so I like that quite a bit. And then on GEDmatch, you can, if they have a tree, you can click on that tree. So you see these little green trees. you click on it, and that gives you a GEDmatch reference number. So you copy that, and then you go back to that main screen and you look under family trees, and under family trees you can find your number, and then you enter both of their numbers, those numbers in the enter the GEDCOMs into, it's called the GEDCOM comparison report.
Okay.
And you get a great report. This is what it ends up looking like, and it lists all of your common ancestors. Now, granted, some of them are not. They use names. They just look for common names.
Or initials, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it's surprising what you can find through that report. It's very helpful.
Okay, when you've done that report, where do you find out that you have any match with it? So if I did like a one-on-one through GEDmatch, where on, after it shows me all the DNA breakdowns, where on that do I find how many centimorgans myself and somebody else share?
Oh, let me go back. Let's see. So this is an example of your output. Now, these are the outputs that you get from an ancestral project, or but they look similar. They have a lot of these same jargony things. So if you look at this, underneath centimorgans, that CM is where you'll find this, the number of centimorgans, and that's important. So let's say you're looking for your mother, you'd want about 3,000 for your number of centimorgans. If you're, or a child son relationship. So, and let's see, what else is helpful there?
Okay, what I'm asking is when you're on GEDmatch itself and you're checking GEDmatch numbers, where, if you're only doing a one-on-one, not necessarily a family, but you're doing a one-on-one, and then all this information comes up.
Oh yeah.
Where on there do you find?
You know, I don't have that picture to show you.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It was just a brainstorm at the moment.
But the nice thing about that report is it shows you at the top the number of centimorgans, and then lower down it tells you exactly where the centimorgans are.
Okay, do you recommend they change the centimorgans as low as 3?
That depends on your usage. So if you know that if you know your relationship to someone, you can do that.
Okay.
It can. So I am in a family group, and I use it to see who is in the extended family. And we know we're related because we're all related to each other, but so we know what that connection is. If you're just doing things randomly, if you're going below 7 centimorgans, you're running into error. Really, 12 centimorgans is about as low as you want to go.
Yeah.
But if the SMPs are high, you can go lower on your centimorgans. So in that, let me show you this report again. So if, let's say, I'm looking at my matches here. The person here, Maud Schmo, she
a good name.
Maud Schmo, she has 911 snips.
Yeah.
So that's a much more reliable measurement there. It's kind of like, I used to teach statistics, and you have, the more measurements you have, the more accuracy you have, the more accurate you can say. So even a small difference, if you have a lot of participants, you can say that it really exists. So I would say with Maud, even though it's a small number of centimorgans, it's probably really there. So does that help?
It absolutely does. Is there anything else that you feel that our viewers would benefit from knowing?
I would say those are the most important things. Those will get you started.
Okay.
But one thing I didn't talk about a lot are these Facebook groups. And I would just say they're a great resource. You never know who you're going to find in a Facebook group. And the reason why I like them is because you have a community of people who are dedicated to this, who find this entertaining. And that's what I am. I find this entertaining. And I'm willing to go back and forth with my Go Fish with my relatives and say, oh, do you have the Browns? Do you have the Woodwards? And that takes a lot of effort. And a lot of people, when you email people, you're just emailing anyone who ever used GEDmatch. Exactly. And a lot of people use it for different reasons and they stop being interested in it. But people who are active in a Facebook group, you can ask them questions. And they are usually very happy to share their hard-earned knowledge. We learned this the hard way. And being able to share it with someone is very helpful.
Absolutely. Well, myself, I am an administrator on Quebec adoptees à la crèche, and I have found numerous relatives within that group, but it's mostly affiliated to those who have any experience with Quebec, whether it be looking for family that had any adoption from Quebec, or orphans, black market, and anything like that, or even if you just know of someone in your family that made a comment about being in Quebec. We do help everybody, but for me, myself, my story is evolved around Quebec itself, and I was blown away, because it was like, all right, well, I have all these cousins, and talking to different people and finding out different information, who's who from where and what line and so forth. For me, I'm beginning to learn. Do I know lots? No, I'm not a search angel. But I've learned via my own experience as to what to do. And there are every province has a genealogy group. Every I don't want to say every town. There are groups within certain towns that have people who are fascinated with this. And if you even know the town that you were from or raised in, or your family was, there's records that are there also. Libraries, high school yearbooks, cemeteries, like there's so many different avenues that people can look if this type of platform is too overwhelming. And I'll get back to the fact of just ask the questions. You'll find the answers. It may not be the answer you're seeking, because that has happened also, but 99.9% of the time you will definitely find an answer or another opportunity, right?
Yeah. And some groups, let's say you start a group and you're not very happy with it. Don't let that make you feel bad or make you give up, because some groups it's like sitting at that table for me with my Woodwards and looking around and saying, this is where I belong. These are my people. Some of these groups, you're going to realize this is your group. Yes. And it's full of great people. And one group can be totally different from another group.
Well, exactly. Different personalities that are within that platform, right? So I always say it's like looking for a good therapist. The first one might not be your thing, but the fifth one might be amazing.
Exactly. They might be the breakthrough you need.
Well, exactly. And I mean, we're all creatures of habit. We all want to be heard. We all want to be acknowledged. And, to me, it's a beautiful thing. There's so many platforms out there and groups that people can join. you know.
That's a great resource.
But it's been wonderfully knowledgeable learning different things from you today. And I have to say thank you. And I hope you're able to successfully help others and carry on this passion, because I just find it fascinating to learn more. And on behalf of What Is Your Real Name, I'm Bernadette McDonald, and from AACDQ Quebec adoptees à la crèche, and I just want to say thank you. And it's been a privilege speaking to you.
You're welcome. I really enjoyed it.
Well, have yourself a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
It's great meeting you.
You too. Bye for now.
Bye.